Hello and welcome to a new discussion video series that I'm doing. This is mainly going to be like me just talking, if putting my thoughts out there and the perceptions that I have. It's since typically I don't really put any real like perspectives on everything. I'm usually to myself. I don't typically do this sort of thing. So, as we progress through these discussion videos, the quality will gradually increase. But for now, I want to go ahead and talk about art and all the other intricacies that are tied to it. In a general spectrum, we are going to talk about MOCs. We'll get there, but for now, I just want to go ahead and talk about this. Now, when an event, it's basically something that happens out in the world, and when that keeps reoccurring, like the same event over and over and over, it becomes accepted as the new real world perspective. Kind of like, when you had Henry Ford creating the first car, no one has ever seen a car before. It was new. It was something foreign, a new event that would start a new type of revolution, a new type of perspectives and directions, new words, and so forth. All these tie together to creating one solid, coherent, new world perspective. And now, cars are pretty much common knowledge. And with that, with those events coming common knowledge, it affects where future concepts based off of this new perspective of the world formulates. It affects how things are perceived, how things are translated, how things function, how things operate, how things manifest, based on the principle of how we view things in the world. And when it comes to these types of perceptions, it can either have a negative causality or a positive one. Now, to talk about MOCs and talk about how this all ties to it. Now, there are different art styles that people can achieve when making a MOC. You can have something rather tune styled. There's different tunistic styles. You can have the simplicity. You can have very real world complexity, yet still having that cartoonish style. You can also have a gradient between the two, or you can have heavy realism. Very heavy textures of what it would look like in a real world setting if it were actual thing that were to move, and function in the world that we live in. Or it can be rather futuristic, smooth, free form, out of concept. But even when something is free form, as futuristic, where we can have our expansions on what would be something that is beyond the modern scope, it still falls onto the world of which it grew out of. Because when you grow out of a world that has seen like multiple of previous events that have occurred that became like common knowledge in our perspectives of the real world, that too ends up being a roughly fragile, loose connection to what is the real world. Like even like a wagon, for example, was still like something that would be kind of similar to a car, except there are a whole bunch of different factors. Even though the formulation of shape is still there, the concept of wheels still persisted, but without the need of any like animals, but rather the usage of engines, motors, fuel no less, helped deviate it greatly. But it still falls on the principle of wheels. So, when an event such as a smooth design, it has to be smooth, no gaps, or what have you. And this is the part where most of you would turn and click off of the video, which is perfectly understandable, and I respect your opinions. I am not here to call out any names. I am just merely throwing my thoughts out here, since I really don't throw my thoughts out onto the internet in this format, rather. But there is a point that I'm getting at. You see, all art pieces need to have solidity. Every single one. They do. They do. If you want a piece to feel complete, it needs that solidity. It needs the right color balance, It needs to have some type of visual narrative for expression. But it is the idea of art concepts that is rather lacking. Because people can, as of late, for the longest time, rather, people have been more focused on the smooth design, very clean, in the sense that it all has a very modernistic style. There is some mild aspects of realism invoked as well when it comes to some of these Lego creations that people do make. But they still fall onto the singular art style of modernization. And it is that modernization, the constant flow of that event of making things modernized, that has stagnated continuously to the point where, as of now, it becomes like second nature, common knowledge. For it is expected to be the norm. And it is because it is the norm that people have the perspective of it must have a modernistic view. Even if you're going cyber punk style or whatever, it still falls on the principle of modernization. Now, it could be because you're probably wondering right now, asking in the comments, well, everything has to be modernized, of course, because all the other building styles are rather outdated. There are new building techniques that can be expressed. However, some of those building techniques are repeated over and over. Like, for example, the constant progression of using mixel joints, or the constant progression of using a whole bunch of smooth elements such as CCBS and so forth, even though CCBS is a rather free-form system. It can be used to convey different shapes, different styles, different forms, including with regular system, which is why it is so useful in its utilization, because it has that free-form value. unlike old technique, since it is much more difficult to convey a piece with old technique, but the principles are still there in terms of the aspect of modernization. Because you can have multiple styles in an art piece. It's not singular. You can't just have a single art style. There are always going to be multiple different art styles linked together to convey the art piece that you want to convey, but the process of modernization lingers. And it is because of that, and our view of looks and appearances having such a high precedent, that which is good. Having a good physical appearance of a model is good, especially when you are conveying a particular message with your artwork. But the issue is that when it comes to art pieces, you had to also focus on the structural ability, which is something that I feel has been rather neglected. Now, what do you think I mean by neglected? You're probably wondering. Well, it's rather simple. We, as people, when we go ahead and work on these Lego creations that we do, we focus so heavily on the visual aspect, so heavily, that we lose the most important aspect, which is structural ability. Now, you might be saying, well, my builds are pretty structurally stable. Which may be true, but it is based on your perspectives as well as my own perspectives. But the thing is, besides a matter of perspectives, because that is a very broad term to use with no actual solid meaning to it, it's rather free form, but to specify, when you surround yourself, well, using the process of events again, when you surround yourself with building art pieces, and you're trying to convey that image that you want to convey at the sacrifice of everything else, you begin to adapt your sense of feeling. And when you start to adapt your sense of feeling, you come to accept that the fragile piece that you have created is rather, in fact, a solid piece. A very solid and robust piece of engineering of which you designed. But in actuality, if you were to go ahead and give it to another individual who may not or may share your same field of view, this box, and the box that you live in, they will always have a different perspective. Although similar, they will go ahead and give some critiques so that you may modify your piece to make it better, which is good. Or they may just completely disregard it because it does not fit to their own standards, which is also acceptable, given people has different tastes. That's common knowledge. However, when you lock yourself in a box constantly and not expose yourself to what's around you, that's the moment where all your opinions rather become subjective. You need to actually engage with other members, other builders, other fellow artists, get their perceptions, get a idea and a feeling, rather, of the art pieces that other people produce. And when you hold those pieces and actually hold those models, you'll actually gain a sense of perception that you may have never recognized before. And once you are outside of the box, you end up entering into the real world. Now, that's not to say that you, as an individual, are delusional. Of course not. Delusion and self-isolation are two different things. When you live in a world of delusion, you are accepting imagination over pure facts, while isolation, you're rather have nothing to think about except thoughts. Chatter in the skull. Where your only real perception is through text messages through a computer screen, and you just sitting idly and trying to create your next piece without actually first interacting with other individuals to actually interact with their art pieces in hand, because that is something that not a lot of people can really do. But the value in that is actually greatly high, at least from my experience. And to start getting this conversation to a close, since I did rest my case, I just have to say that it is important, above all else, to convey your own art style. Now, sure, modernization could be accepted as it is now as the new normality of everything when it comes to Lego creations, especially in this Bionicle community. But if we are really going to stand out, we must diverge from modernization, which may also be linked to different art styles, and try to bend it into something new. Though, that is easier than it sounds. Because we have now been ingrained of it as common knowledge to have this modernization aspect of a build with other lingering art styles that are integrated into the piece. But it's mere repetition. You're just putting some peanut butter, which is your modernization, and you're trying to stick it into everything you can. Maybe a Reese's peanut butter cup, or celery with peanut butter, or what have you. It is the same taste, the same feeling. If you go ahead and eat the same thing over and over, the process of consumption, you'll eventually get tired of the flavor. You'll get tired of the aspect. The only thing you'll only be craving for at that point, when you are so engulfed in consuming the same thing over and over, the only aspect you'll actually seek out of it would be the parts usage. What components were utilized to convey this piece? And that is it. Or how was this built? Now, we do live in an era where before the questions of wow and woes, we now ask ourselves the who's and what's. And that is a very sad and tragic reality. Because now, due to us being so formulated into this viewpoint, if you were to diverge from the modernistic style which others up above are doing, you will be considered as bad, terrible, obsolete when it comes to the creations you make, which is completely irrational and unjust, at least in my opinion, though that is just my opinion. After all, this is a series that I created where I can formulate my own thoughts and discuss to you all, since I don't really convey my own thoughts and perspectives. But that is the sad reality. We are killing ourselves, in a way, with this viewpoint and ideology. And it ties to, and I'm sorry to say it, for it may stain a couple of people's viewpoints on that. It may stain their views towards me, but I have to say it because it is the reality we live in. But the Lego Ideas Project, the 20th anniversary. I don't want to tear into this. This was someone that put their heart and their love into an art piece. And that really shows. When you go ahead and put your heart into something, it becomes something more, something grand. Because it is an expression of who as you are, who have grown through these occurrences in life to where you are now, and you are conveying it and showing it to the world. And that is quite honestly a remarkable and beautiful thing. But I feel that the reason it didn't make it, despite the nostalgia and the love and passion that was in it, it forgot the one crucial aspect that it solely needed in that piece. And that was the art style of original Bionicle. Because when you go ahead and convey something of your favorite franchise, and you try to, that was specifically known for a particular art style, and then you convert it into something else entirely, and it losing, in essence, part of its charm, despite the love and care and responsibility that you've put into that piece, it's a tragedy. Because I want Bionicle to come back more than ever, as anyone else does. But it also ties to the Generation 2 animations in a way. Because it was a simple art style, similar to Minog, but it wasn't the same kind of art style. It still had a different feel, a different approach, a different aura. The same goes with the project because it is brick built. Now, I am not talking about structurability. I am not talking about that. I am talking about art style. When you make something in bricks, you can convey realism, futurism, or tunistic approach. And Lego is very freeform in what you can do and what you can convey. But it missed that factor. Now, there were different forms. You had the micro scale. You had the minifig scale, and you had the mixel figures. But that is all structurability. You are building a figure or rather characters in the same style. It is not something of different variety. It's just a different variety of structure, not a different variety of art style. Those are two very different things. And when you lose either one of those, like lack of structurability, you lose the aspect of play, the aspect of fun. Now, sure, some art pieces aren't meant for play or meant for fun. They're meant to be viewed and so forth. Like, for example, when someone makes a giant Lego city. But sure, there is still that factor of displaying your minifigures in that city, whichever you wish, creating new scenes and so forth. But it can still retain a fragile piece. But that is all still in the same art style. And I'm done ranting. I am done ranting. I kind of went on a tangent again. Again, this is not scripted at all. This is just a formulation of thoughts. That's the third time I said it, and I'm not going to say it again. But that is all I really had to say. But I'll leave with this one message. You do not need to build something in a modernistic style. There are other styles that you can convey. And depending on that art style, you then integrate that structurability. Because if you are making something for display only, you can make the structurability as fragile as you like, for it is not meant to be for what others may deem it to be. But when you go ahead and try to do another art style, like maybe a tunistic approach, but build it for play, then you need that structurability to be a very strong component in that figure. Or if you want to go ahead and do it in the Bionicle style, like similar to how I make my creations, self-promotion there. Sorry about that. Then structurability is also high. Because I am conveying it in a different art style than what you may be conveying in your builds, for it is a different art style that may be utilizing the same modernization as everybody else. The same, very same, that to the point that only drives people to ask the what's in the house, rather than the woes and the ahs. So build what you want to build. And be sure to emphasize the art style that you want to go for. And how that structurability of the figure will translate towards that. Because if you do that, sure, maybe at first you may not really be like accepted as the best builder ever in existence. That takes time. Like everything takes time. But that is only mainly because of the current view of the requirement of modernization. The principle of shoving peanut butter in everything until you eventually get tired of the taste of peanut butter and begin asking the hows and the whats. So this is Chubichan here. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to go ahead and leave a like. And if you want to see more content of me rambling, be sure to hit the subscription button. And also, if you want to go ahead and contact me in any social media, if you have any questions and so forth, because quite frankly, I don't really cast my own thoughts in this manner. You can be sure to ask me questions privately or whatever thoughts you may have. But anyways, this is Troopshot here, signing off.